Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a stack of research that is, I think, basically a user manual for your own gut. And I want to start right at the edge of the cliff.
The edge of the cliff. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Metaphorically, of course. Think about the last time you had to make a really fast decision.
A snap judgment.
Exactly. I'm talking about those moments where you don't have a spreadsheet, you don't have a pro-con list, and you definitely don't have time. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up, maybe your stomach drops, and you just act.
That's the classic gut feeling, right? That little voice inside?
Right. But here's the problem with the gut feeling, and it's a huge problem. Sometimes it saves your life. You merge into the next lane a split second before a car crash happens right where you were.
And you feel like a superhero, like you have a sixth sense.
You do, but then, other times, you bet on that sure thing stock your gut screamed at you to buy.
Well, no.
Or you hire that person who just felt like a perfect fit in the interview, and it turns out to be a complete unmitigated disaster.
And you're left standing there looking at the wreckage, just asking, what happened? I was so sure.
That is the mission for today's deep dive. We are going to pop the hood on the human brain to answer a question that I think haunts anyone who has to make decisions for a living.
Or just for, being alive.
True. The question is intuition actually real? Is it some kind of magic? Or is it just a clever trick our brain plays on us? And most importantly, how do we tell the difference between a life-saving hunch and a catastrophic mistake?
And to get to that answer, we're looking at a really fascinating moment in the history of psychology. The source material is a chapter titled Expert Intuition. When can we trust it? But honestly, the science itself is almost overshadowed by the drama behind it.
I love this backstory. It's not often you get excited about academic papers, but this one was born out of a feud.
A genuine feud, yeah. You have to picture two warring tribes in the world of psychology. And they didn't just disagree on a few points. They had fundamentally different views of human nature.
Okay, so paint the picture for us. In the blue corner, who do we have?
In the blue corner, you have the skeptics. Their intellectual heavyweight is the author of our source material. And this is the heuristics and biases camp.
Heuristics and biases. It sounds very academic, but their worldview is actually, well, it's pretty cynical, isn't it?
It's definitely cautious. I'd say deeply cautious. Their starting point is that human judgment is fundamentally flawed.
Full of bugs.
Riddled with bugs. They believe our brains are lazy. We take shortcuts, heuristics. We rely on stereotypes. And we are consistently pathologically overconfident. These are the people who have spent decades proving that a simple algorithm, like a basic computer formula, can usually outperform a human expert.
Like a doctor diagnosing a disease or a stock picker choosing an investment.
Exactly. So their whole worldview is basically, don't trust yourself. You are a walking collection of cognitive biases.
So to them, intuition is usually just a fancy, more respectable word for jumping to conclusions.
Precisely. They look at the data and they see that when people rely on their gut, they often ignore base rates, they ignore statistics, and they fall into all these traps, like the illusion of validity.
Which is that feeling where you're absolutely certain you know what you're doing, but you really don't.
It's confidence without competence. So that's the skeptics. But then in the red corner, you have the believers.
The believers. And this is the group known as the NDM, the Naturalistic Decision Making group.
Right. And their champion is a psychologist named Gary Klein. Now, Klein looks at the skeptics in their pristine university labs, running these artificial experiments on college sophomores, answering multiple choice questions.
And he's not impressed.
He just shakes his head. He thinks it's completely irrelevant to how real experts actually function in the world. Klein studies experts in the wild.
So he's not in the lab.
He's in the field. He spends his time with fireground commanders, with NICU nurses, with military leaders. I mean, people who make high-stakes, life-or-death decisions under incredible time pressure. And when Klein watches a fire chief pull his team out of a burning building seconds before the floor collapses, he doesn't see a bias.
He sees a superpower.
He sees a marvel of human cognition. He sees years of hard-won experience compressed into a single, life-saving, split-second insight.
He sees a form of intelligence that the skeptics were completely ignoring because it didn't fit into their tidy little algorithms.
Exactly. So you have this massive divide. The skeptics are obsessed with failure and flaws, and they say intuition is a trap. The NDM group, Klein's crew, they're fascinated by success, and they say intuition is the very pinnacle of expertise.
Now, usually in the academic world, when people disagree this profoundly, they just, write nasty footnotes about each other in obscure journals for 30 years.
Or they just ignore each other entirely. It's much easier to stay in your own silo, surrounded by people who already agree with you.
But this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. They decided to do something called an adversarial collaboration.
Which just sounds intense, like the title of a thriller movie.
It really does, and it was, in its own way, an intellectual thriller. The author, our skeptic-in-chief, and Gary Klein, our believer-in-chief, agreed to lock horns. They spent nearly 8 years trying to bridge this enormous gap.
And it wasn't easy. It wasn't some beautiful friendship from day one. The source material makes it clear there were shouting matches, hundreds of emails. The project almost fell apart multiple times.
Because their worldviews were just so fundamentally opposed.
They were. But they had a shared goal. They found some common ground. The author really admired Klein's book, Sources of Power, and they agreed to try and solve the puzzle.
Not just to win the argument.
No, they wanted to map the boundary line. They wanted to answer one very specific, very practical question. When can you trust an experienced professional who claims to have an intuition?
And that map, that's what we're going to walk through today. Because it turns out there is a checklist. There's actually a way to know if your hunch is gold or if it's garbage.
And maybe we should start by acknowledging the gold. Because even the most hardened skeptics had to admit that sometimes intuition is just mind-blowing.
Okay, so let's get into the marvels. This brings us to the Blink connection, because right in the middle of their long collaboration, Malcolm Gladwell publishes his massive bestseller, Blink.
Right, which completely popularized this whole idea of thinking without thinking. And the most famous story from that book, which our source material also dissects in detail, is the story of the Koros statue.
I remember this one. It's about a very convincing fake that fooled almost everyone.
Well, it fooled the scientists. It did not fool the art experts.
Okay, set the scene for us. What happened?
So it's the 1980s. The J. Paul Getty Museum in California is approached by an art dealer with something absolutely incredible. It's a Koros, a life-size marble statue of a standing boy from ancient Greece.
A huge deal for a museum.
A massive deal. If it's real, it's worth about $10 million. It would be a crown jewel for any collection in the world.
So the stakes are incredibly high. I'm guessing they didn't just write a check on the spot.
No, they did their due diligence. They brought in a geologist to analyze the marble. They used electron microscopes. They did all the modern scientific tests.
And what did the science say?
The geologist's report came back. It concluded that the surface of the stone had undergone a natural process of aging, of dolomitization, that would take thousands of years. It did not look like a modern forgery. The science gave it a green light. The data said, buy it.
Okay, so the algorithm says yes, but then they brought in the humans.
Then they brought in the real experts. Not just geologists, but art historians, sculptors, people who have spent their entire lives looking at, touching, and thinking about Greek art.
And this is where it gets weird.
This is where it gets very weird. They bring in these experts one by one. They're standing in front of this magnificent, scientifically validated statue. And they felt sick.
Sick? You mean like physically ill?
Literally. One expert described a wave of intuitive repulsion.
Yeah.
Another one was just staring at the statue's fingernails and said, I don't know what it is, but it's wrong. They couldn't write a formal paper explaining why. They couldn't prove it with data. But their gut, their intuition, was screaming at them that this thing was a fake.
And this is usually where the story stops in, popular culture, right? We say, wow, what a mystery. Experts have a sixth sense. It's treated like this magical, mystical connection to the art.
Exactly. But our mission today is to demystify that. Gary Klein and the author argue that this isn't magic at all. It is highly specific, high-speed data processing.
So what were they actually seeing? Because repulsion isn't exactly a data point on a spreadsheet.
It is, though, if you know how to decode it. Later analysis, after the museum had already bought it, by the way, proved the statue was indeed a masterful fake.
So the experts were right.
They were right. The aging on the stone had been faked, using, of all things, potato mold. But the experts didn't know that. What their brains were picking up on were dozens of subtle incongruities. For example, those fingernails.
What was wrong with the fingernails?
The way they were carved was a mix of two different stylistic periods from ancient Greece that never actually overlapped in history. It was a subtle mashup.
Ah, so it was like seeing a Roman centurion wearing a digital watch. You might not immediately be able to articulate that timepiece is anachronistic, but you immediately feel something about that looks off.
That is a perfect analogy. Their brains, their fast automatic System 1, had scanned a massive internal database of thousands of legitimate statues they'd seen over their careers. This one didn't match the pattern. It triggered a cognitive alarm bell.
But because that processing happens so fast, so unconsciously, the conscious mind doesn't get the specific message anachronistic fingernails detected. It just gets the final emotional output. Something is wrong.
And that feeling, that's what we call a gut feeling.
So it's not magic, it's recognition. It's
That
just like recognizing your mother's voice on the telephone in a single syllable. You don't analyze the frequency or the pitch or the timbre, you just know.
You just know. And that is the marvel.
Okay, so that's the marvel of intuition. That's when it works perfectly. But the text pivots pretty hard here, because for every Koro statue where the gut is right, there's a Warren G. Harding where the gut is disastrously, catastrophically wrong.
Ah, yes, the Harding error. This is the dark side of that exact same mental mechanism.
Explain this one. Because Harding, by most historical accounts, is considered one of the worst U.S. presidents. But he was incredibly popular before he was elected.
He was. And it was largely because of his appearance. If you look at a photo of Warren G. Harding, he is central casting's idea of what a president should look like.
He looked the part.
He looked absolutely perfect. Tall, a strong square jaw, a deep commanding voice, a full head of silver hair. He looked presidential.
And so voters looked at him and had that same kind of visceral reaction the art experts had. But instead of, this is a fake, their gut feeling said, this is a leader.
Yes, they felt a sense of rightness, of confidence in him.
Okay, so this is the key question. Why is this different? The art experts relied on their gut, and they were right. The voters relied on their gut, and they were spectacularly wrong. What is the difference in the brain's process?
It all comes down to a crucial concept called substitution. This is a key term for anyone listening. When the brain is faced with a really, really hard question, it will often, without telling you, swap it for an easier one.
Give me the breakdown for the Harding case. What was the hard question?
The hard question for a voter is, will this person be a competent administrator who can navigate complex geopolitical and economic issues while maintaining ethical integrity?
That's nearly impossible to answer unless you do weeks of in-depth research on his policy history and his character.
Exactly. It requires massive mental effort.
Yeah.
It's a System 2 question. So System 1, the lazy automatic part of the brain, says, ugh, too hard. And it substitutes an easier question.
Which is?
Does this man look like a strong, competent leader?
And the answer to that much easier question is a resounding yes.
Yes. So the brain hands your conscious mind a little slip of paper that says, yes, he's great, vote for him. And you feel confident. You feel like you've done a thorough assessment of his leadership potential. But all you've really done is assessed his chin.
That is absolutely terrifying because from the inside, the feeling itself, the feeling that the statue is a fake, and the feeling that Harding is a good leader, the sensation of confidence is identical.
And that is the trap.
Yeah.
This is maybe the most important takeaway from the first part of our deep dive. Subjective confidence, that feeling of I just know, is useless as a metric of truth. It is a terrible guide. It applies equally to the miracle of the art expert and the blunder of the voter.
So, if the feeling itself is useless, if we can't trust our own confidence, how do we tell the difference? We need to dig deeper into the mechanics. How does the expert brain, the one that works, actually function? You mentioned the firefighters earlier. Let's go back to that burning building.
This is really where Gary Klein's work completely changed the game. Before Klein came along, the standard model of decision-making in psychology was something called rational choice.
Which is basically the pro-con list.
Basically, the assumption was that when a leader has to make a choice, they mentally list option A, option B, and option C. They weigh the pros and cons of each, they calculate the probability of success, and then they pick the one with the highest score. It's very logical, it's very deliberate, it's very slow.
And if the roof is literally about to collapse on you, you don't really have time for a PowerPoint presentation comparing your options.
You don't have time at all. So Klein went into the field with these fireground commanders. He expected to see a sped up, maybe less formal version of this rational choice model. Maybe they only compared 2 options instead of 5.
But that's not what he found.
It's not what he found at all. What he found shocked him, and it shocked the entire field. The fireground commanders told him over and over, we don't compare options, we don't make choices.
That sounds insane. How can you be a commander and not make choices? What are they doing then?
In the vast majority of cases, they generated only one single course of action.
Just one.
Just one. The very first one that popped into their head. And the craziest part was, it was usually the right one.
Okay, now that sounds like magic again. We just demystified the art expert, and now you're telling me firefighters are just guessing and getting it right? How can the first idea be the best idea?
It's not a guess. Klein developed a model to explain it. He calls it the RPD model. That stands for Recognition Primed Decision. And it works in two very distinct phases.
Okay, walk us through it. I'm a fire chief. I arrive on the scene of a burning warehouse. What's happening in my brain?
Okay, so phase one is pure recognition. This is system one, it's automatic. You step out of the truck and you're not consciously thinking, you're just absorbing. You look at the smoke, it's a certain color, maybe it's yellow and churning. You feel the heat, but it's coming from the floor, not the ceiling, which is strange. You hear a specific type of muffled roar.
I'm taking in all these little cues.
Cues, exactly. And your brain, in a fraction of a second, matches this specific constellation of cues. The yellow smoke, the floor heat, the muffled roar against a massive database of every fire you've ever fought or studied.
It's pattern matching. My brain is saying, this looks like the chemical fire at the plastics factory back in '98.
Precisely. And attached to that memory, that pattern, is a script, a preloaded plan of action. If the smoke is yellow and the heat is coming from the floor, it's not a normal fire, it's a basement fire, and the floor above it is about to collapse. The standard procedure is to pull everyone out immediately. The solution appears in your mind, fully formed.
But wait a second. If they just act on the very first idea that pops into their head, isn't that incredibly reckless? What if that first idea is wrong?
That's where phase two kicks in.
Hmm.
And this is the part that separates the true expert from the reckless amateur. It's called mental simulation.
Mental simulation.
Before the commander yells the order, "Get out," he pauses for just a split second, and in that split second, he runs a movie in his head. A quick, dirty simulation. He imagines his team inside. He imagines the floor giving way. He asks, will that plan work? If I pull them out now, can they get to the exits in time?
So he's stress testing the idea in his mind's eye.
He is. He's looking for flaws. If the mental movie have a happy ending, everyone gets out safely, he gives the order. If the movie shows a potential problem like the exit is blocked, he doesn't then compare it to another option. He just scraps the first idea, modifies it, uses the back exit, or waits for the next plausible option to bubble up from his experience.
But, and this is the key, he never compares option A to option B side by side. He just evaluates option A on its own merits. Is this good enough?
Will this work? It is wildly efficient. It explains why they can move so fast. They aren't paralyzed by choice because they aren't really making a choice in the way we normally think about it.
Herbert Simon, one of the giants of this field, he put it beautifully. You have the quote there.
I do. He said, the situation has provided the cue. This cue has given the expert access to information stored in memory, and the information provides the answer. Intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition.
Recognition. It keeps coming back to that word. It's like recognizing a face in a crowd.
Exactly. When your friend Peter walks into a crowded room, you don't consciously analyze him. You don't say, okay, let me analyze the nose width, compare it to the stored Peter file, check the ear shape, the hairline. Yes, the probability is 99.8% that this is Peter.
No, of course not. You just say, hey, Peter.
You just know. You don't know how you know. You just recognize him instantly. Expert intuition is simply recognizing a professional situation as easily and automatically as you recognize a human face.
But, and this is the giant caveat, the one that sets up the whole rest of the deep dive, you can only recognize Peter if you have met Peter before. Many, many times.
Bingo. You cannot have expert intuition if you haven't painstakingly built the database of experiences in the first place.
So let's talk about building that database, because the text makes a really sharp distinction between two different types of learning. There's emotional learning, which can be lightning fast, and then there's professional expertise, which is painfully, agonizingly slow.
Right. And this is a critical distinction because people confuse these two all the time. Emotional learning is primal. The text uses the classic example of Pavlov's dogs. You ring a bell, you give them food. After a few tries, the bell itself causes them to salivate. They learn bell equals hope.
Or the opposite, which is fear. Fear is learned incredibly quickly. One bad experience is often enough.
It really is. The author tells a very personal story about this, about a road rage incident.
Right, at the San Francisco airport.
Yeah. Years ago, he was driving to the airport. He's on this specific looping ramp. A guy in another car gets angry, cuts him off, follows him up the ramp, rolls down the window, and just screams obscenities at him. A truly terrifying, random, aggressive encounter.
We've all had moments like that, unfortunately. They stick with you.
They do. And now, years and years later, every single time the author drives up that specific ramp, His body tenses up. He hears the man's voice in his head. He feels that jolt of fear and anger. His body remembers.
So that's a kind of intuition, right? His brain is predicting potential danger based on a past event.
It is, but it's not expertise. It's just emotional learning, a fast, crude association. This ramp equals that crazy guy.
Yeah.
But that one experience doesn't make him an expert driver or an expert at predicting road rage. It's just a scar.
It's a single data point, not a rich database.
Exactly. True expertise, the kind the firefighters have, or chess masters, or master musicians, is a collection of what the text calls mini-skills. It's not one big thing you learn. It's thousands and thousands of tiny recognitions acquired over a long time.
And this brings us right to the doorstep of the famous 10,000-hour rule.
It does. Now, that rule is a bit of an oversimplification, but the core idea is sound. In a field like chess, for instance, research has found that to reach the grandmaster level, you need about 10,000 hours of dedicated, focused practice.
Which is an insane amount of time. That's like playing chess for 5 hours a day, every day, for 6 years.
It's a huge investment. And what are they actually doing in that time? Are they just memorizing millions of moves?
It's more than that.
It's so much more than that. They are learning the alphabet, the vocabulary, and the grammar of the game. The text uses a brilliant analogy here with learning to read.
Okay, let's break that down.
Think about a first grader who's just learning to read. They look at a word like cat. They have to sound it out, C-A-T. They have to process every single letter individually. It's slow. It takes conscious, deliberate effort.
But as an adult, I don't do that. I just see the word cat as a single object.
You don't even see cat. You see entire phrases, entire clauses as single units of meaning. The text brings up the poem Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll.
Oh, I love that poem. "'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe."
Exactly. Now think about those words. Slithy, gimble, wabe. Those are nonsense words. You've never seen them in a dictionary. But when you read them, you know exactly how to pronounce them. You know the rhythm. You know instinctively that slithy is an adjective and toves is a plural noun.
Yeah, that's true. I can feel the grammar of the sentence, even though the words themselves are completely fake.
That is expert intuition in action. You have read so many millions of words in English that you have internalized the deep structure of the language. You can navigate a nonsense situation, a sentence you've never seen before, perfectly because you recognize the underlying pattern. That is what a chess master does with a chessboard.
So when a chess master looks at a board, they aren't seeing 32 individual pieces any more than I see individual letters in a sentence.
Correct. They see chunks. They see patterns. They see the tension between a knight and a bishop as a single word. They see the structure of the pawns as a phrase. They are literally reading the story of the game.
And because they can read the story so fluently, the next move just pops into their head. They don't have to calculate it any more than you have to calculate how to pronounce the word brillig.
It just feels right. It's the logical next step in the sentence.
That is a fascinating way to put it. It really does demystify expertise. It's not magic. It's just vocabulary. You're building a massive vocabulary of situations.
Precisely. But here's the catch. The absolutely critical catch. You can only build a vocabulary if the language has consistent rules. If the letter A sometimes sounded like B and sometimes sounded like Z, you could never learn to read.
And this brings us right to the heart of the conflict and to the core takeaway for our listeners, the trust equation. Because Gary Klein, the believer, he tended to trust experts who were confident. He thought, if a fire chief has a strong feeling that it's unsafe, it's unsafe. They know what they're talking about.
And the author, the skeptic, pushed back hard on that. He said, hold on a second. I know plenty of confident stock pickers who lose their clients' money every single year. I know confident political pundits who are wrong 60% of the time, but they say it with absolute certainty on television.
So you have this collision. Confidence means something to Klein, but it means nothing to the author. How did they resolve this?
They agreed on a ground rule that is probably the single most important lesson from their entire collaboration. Do not trust confidence.
That's a huge statement. Just throw it out entirely.
As a guide to accuracy, yes. The feeling of confidence is generated internally by the coherence of the story your brain tells itself, not by the quality of the evidence.
Right. The brain is a coherence machine. It wants everything to make sense.
Yeah.
If you have a hunch, your brain will immediately suppress any doubt, ignore any conflicting information, and invent a neat and tidy story to justify that hunch.
This is what the author calls WISIAD. What you see is all there is.
We've talked about that before. The brain takes the tiny bit of information it has and it builds a whole confident world out of it, completely ignoring the vast universe of information it doesn't have.
Exactly. So a stock picker looks at a new tech company. He sees, ooh, great CEO, really charismatic, and a cool new product. System 1 screams, winner, buy. They feel incredibly confident, but they are completely ignoring interest rates, competitor supply chains, global market volatility, all the stuff they don't see. Their confidence is based on a very small, very incomplete story.
So if we can't trust confidence, if that feeling is a lie, what can we trust?
We can trust the environment. This was the big breakthrough. Klein and the author agreed that for an intuition to be valid and trustworthy, two conditions absolutely must be met. Number one, the environment must be sufficiently regular to be predictable.
Regular, meaning it has stable rules, it follows patterns.
Exactly. Chess is perfectly regular. The knight always moves in an L shape. It never randomly decides to move like a queen for a turn. Firefighting is regular. The laws of physics are the laws of physics. Fire burns upwards. Gravity pulls things down. These are stable causal links you can learn.
Okay, so what's an example of an irregular or what they call a zero validity environment?
The stock market is the classic example. Predicting the future price of an individual stock is, for all intents and purposes, in a zero validity environment.
Why? There are some rules, right? Like supply and demand.
There are, but there are far too many variables, and the rules themselves change. A political event in another country, a tweet from an influential person, a new technology that no one saw coming, these things can change the entire game overnight. The patterns of the past don't reliably predict the future.
So in those environments, intuition is literally impossible to develop.
It's effectively impossible. You cannot learn to recognize patterns if stable patterns don't exist. If you are a stock picker who claims you have intuition, you are either extremely lucky or, more likely, you are delusional. You're just reacting to random noise.
Wow. Okay, so condition 1 is a regular environment. What's condition 2?
Condition 2 is equally important. The individual must have had an opportunity to learn these regularities through prolonged practice.
So even if the environment is regular like chess, I can't trust my intuition if I've only played 3 games my entire life.
Exactly. The rules exist, but you haven't been exposed to them long enough to internalize them. So let's put it together. If you meet a political expert who says, I have a gut feeling about who will win the presidential election in 10 years, you can dismiss that intuition out of hand.
Okay, let's run the checklist. Why?
First, is the environment regular? No, long-term politics is chaos. It's a zero validity environment. Strike one. Second, has the expert had an opportunity to practice? No. You can't practice predicting an event that only happens once every 4 years. You'd need centuries to get enough data points. The feedback loop is way too slow. Strike two.
The feedback loop. That's the key phrase right there, isn't it? That brings us to the next section of our roadmap. The quality of the feedback determines the quality of the intuition.
It's everything. Without good feedback, you can't learn anything.
Let's use the car braking analogy from the text. I think that really nails it for people.
It's perfect. Think about how you learned to brake a car when you were a teenager. You're coming up to a sharp curve for the first time. You press the brake pedal.
Right, and if I press too hard, the car jerks and my instructor yells at me.
Immediate, unambiguous feedback. It's a punishment.
If I don't press hard enough, the car feels scary and loose as it goes around the turn.
Again, immediate, unambiguous feedback. Another punishment.
But if I get it just right, the turn feels smooth and controlled.
A reward. Because that feedback is so immediate and so clear, your body and your brain learn the physics of that car very, very quickly. You develop an intuition for braking. Now compare that to a harbor pilot who is trying to steer a giant supertanker.
Those things are massive. They take miles to turn or stop.
Exactly. The pilot turns the wheel on the bridge and nothing happens, not for minutes. By the time the ship actually starts to turn, the wind might have changed, the current might have shifted. It is incredibly difficult to link your specific action turning the wheel to the eventual result.
So the feedback is delayed and ambiguous, which makes intuition much harder to build.
Much, much harder. And then you get to the most dangerous situation of all, what the psychologist Robin Hogarth calls wicked environments. These are environments that don't just give you bad feedback, they actively lie to you. They teach you the wrong lessons.
This is where we get to the story of the typhoid doctor. The story is, well, it's pretty gross, but it's incredibly powerful.
It's a tragic but perfect example from the early 20th century. There was this physician who was famous in his hospital for his uncanny ability to diagnose typhoid fever. He claimed he had a special intuition. He could predict which patients were about to come down with it just by palpating their tongues.
Palpating, so he would feel their tongue with his hands.
Yes, and here's the thing. His predictions were incredibly accurate. If he examined a patient and said, "You're going to get typhoid," sure enough, within a day or two, they got typhoid.
So he must have been a brilliant diagnostician. He was feeling some subtle change in the tongue tissue that no one else could.
No, he didn't wash his hands.
Oh no.
He was the carrier. He would touch a patient who already had typhoid, get the bacteria on his hands, then go to the next patient's bed, feel their tongue, and infect them with the disease.
That is horrifying.
It's a complete horror story.
Mm-hmm.
But now, put yourself inside his head for a moment. From his perspective, look at the feedback loop. He makes a prediction. This patient will get sick. The prediction comes true. His brain gets a hit of dopamine. I am a genius. My intuition is 100% accurate. I really am an expert.
But the feedback loop was perfectly reinforcing the absolute wrong lesson.
That is a wicked environment. The feedback is clear and immediate, but it is profoundly misleading. And this happens in the modern world all the time. Think about a corporate culture where the loudest, most aggressive, most overconfident managers are the ones who always get promoted.
So if you're a young manager in that company, you quickly develop an intuition that says aggression and overconfidence equals competence.
Exactly. You act that way, you get promoted, it works. The feedback is clear. But maybe the company as a whole is failing because of that toxic culture. But your personal feedback loop, the promotion, the bonus, tells you you're doing exactly the right thing. You are learning a lesson that is true for your career, but catastrophically false for reality.
That is a crucial distinction. Just because a behavior is rewarded doesn't mean it's correct.
Not at all. And this leads to the final piece of the puzzle, which is the idea of uneven skills. We tend to think of expertise as a monolithic badge. You know, she's an expert doctor or he's an expert lawyer. But the text argues that you can be a world-class expert in one part of your job and a complete bumbling novice in another part at the very same time.
The example of the psychotherapist was really interesting here.
Think about a therapist in a session with a patient. The patient says something and suddenly gets very angry. A skilled therapist instantly knows intuitively how to de-escalate that. They change their tone of voice, they lean forward, they use a specific phrase.
Because they get immediate feedback. They can see the patient's shoulders relax, their breathing slow down.
Exactly. The feedback is instantaneous. They have thousands of hours of practice in in-session dynamics. They are true experts at that. But now, ask that same therapist a different question. How will this patient be doing in 5 years? Will they be married? Will they be successful in their career?
They have absolutely no idea.
They might think they know. They might have a very strong hunch. Oh, this patient has so much potential, they're going to thrive. But they get zero reliable feedback on those long-term predictions. They rarely find out what actually happens 5 years down the road. And even if they do, so many other life events have happened that it's impossible to link the therapy to the outcome.
So a therapist can be a genius at the process of treatment, but a total fool at the process of prognosis.
Exactly. But here's the trap. They probably feel equally confident about both judgments.
Of course, because the internal feeling of confidence is the same. The provenance of the skill, though, is completely different.
Provenance. That's an art world term, isn't it? Like tracking the history of a painting to see if it's a genuine Rembrandt or a fake.
Yes, exactly.
And that is the ultimate verdict of this entire 8-year collaboration. If you want to evaluate an intuitive hunch, your own or someone else's, don't look at the hunch itself. Don't analyze how confident it feels. Look at its provenance. Look at the history of the person and, more importantly, the nature of the field they work in.
So we have a practical checklist. Let's recap this for the listener, make it really concrete. You're in a big meeting. Your CEO slams his hand on the table and says, "Forget the data. I have a gut feeling this merger is going to be a huge success. I can just feel it." Do you trust him?
Okay, let's run the checklist. Question 1. Is the environment regular? Is the success of major corporate mergers a predictable phenomenon with stable rules?
Absolutely not. Every company is different. The economy changes. Competitors react in unpredictable ways. It's a pretty chaotic, low-validity environment.
Right. So that's strike 1. Now for question 2. Has he had an opportunity to practice? How many $10 billion mergers has this CEO personally overseen in his career?
Maybe 2. 3 at the most.
Strike 2. You cannot learn a reliable pattern from a sample size of 3 in a chaotic world.
So his powerful gut feeling is What is it then? Just bluster.
It's an illusion.
Yeah.
It's the Harding error. It's substitution. He likes the idea of the merger. Maybe he likes the other CEO. They play golf together. He's substituting the easy question, do I like this deal, for the impossibly hard question, will this deal create long-term shareholder value?
Now let's contrast that with the fire chief on the scene of a fire screaming, "Get out now, the roof is going to collapse."
Run the checklist. Question 1.
Yeah.
Regular environment. Yes.
Yeah.
The physics of fire and the engineering of buildings follow stable, predictable rules.
Yeah.
Question 2. Opportunity to practice. Yes. He's probably been to 2,000 house fires in his career. He's seen this exact pattern of smoke and sound a dozen times before.
So you trust him with your life?
Immediately and without question.
It's amazing because when you break it down with that 2-question checklist, it seems so obvious. But in the moment, that feeling of confidence, whether it's from the CEO or the fire chief, it carries so much emotional weight.
We are hardwired to trust confidence in others, and even more so in ourselves. It takes a lot of cognitive effort, real System 2 effort, to step back from that compelling feeling and say, wait a minute, what is the provenance of this intuition?
So after 8 years of arguing, where did our two warring tribes end up? Did Klein and the author hug it out and agree on everything?
Well, they successfully published a joint paper. The title tells you everything you need to know. Conditions for Intuitive Expertise, a Failure to Disagree.
A failure to disagree. I love that.
They agreed on the facts. They agreed on the mechanics, on the checklist, but they didn't really change their fundamental attitudes. Their personalities remained intact.
How so?
Gary Klein, the NDM guy who loves experts, he still hates the word bias. He thinks it's insulting. He still loves to tell stories of human success and ingenuity, the firefighter saving the day, the nurse spotting the subtle symptom.
He's the optimist. He focuses on the marvels.
He does. And the author, our resident skeptic, the source material says he still gets a quiet thrill out of seeing arrogant experts get their comeuppance. He still enjoys it when a simple algorithm beats a high-paid human. He sees the marvels of intuition as the rare, lucky exceptions in a world mostly defined by flaws and errors.
It's the optimist versus the pessimist, in a way. The glass half full versus the glass half empty.
It is. But they gave us a shared measuring cup. They gave us the tools to figure out how much is actually in the glass.
So if I had to boil this entire deep dive down, here's the big takeaway for me. Intuition isn't magic. It's memorial. It's high-speed recognition, built on thousands of hours of practice in a world that plays by the rules.
That's it, in a nutshell.
It works beautifully in chess, firefighting, and nursing places where the world is regular and you get quick, clear feedback. It fails spectacularly in the stock market, in long-term political forecasting, in corporate strategy places where chaos reigns and feedback is slow, ambiguous, or just plain wrong.
And the most dangerous thing you can possibly do is confuse the two. To take the genuine confidence you earned in a regular world and misapply it to a wicked world.
That's where fortunes are lost and bad decisions get made.
Absolutely.
So here is our final challenge to you, the listener. We want you to take this checklist and audit your own intuition. Think about the area in your professional or personal life where you feel the most confident, where you most trust your gut.
Maybe it's in hiring people. Maybe it's in your ability to pick winning fantasy football teams. Maybe it's in your talent for reading your spouse's mood.
Now, be brutally honest with yourself. Ask those 2 questions. First, is this a truly regular environment? Do the rules stay the same day after day?
And second, have I had thousands of opportunities to practice? And have I gotten immediate, clear, unambiguous feedback on my past judgments, both the successes and the failures?
Or have you just been remembering the times you were right and conveniently forgetting all the times you were wrong?
Because if you haven't been rigorously keeping score, there's a very good chance you're just suffering from a powerful and very comforting illusion of validity.
A little humility about our hunches goes a very long way. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for trusting us with your brain today.
Keep questioning those gut feelings.
We'll see you next time.